Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be getting back into a series that we haven't touched on in quite a little while at this point, with Youngblood number 4. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in February of 1993, we can see here on the cover several of the team members are featured very prominently, with Chapel front and center. Of course, you've got Bedrock, who is still Bedrock at this point in the storyline. He hasn't been changed to Badrock yet. Standing in the back, because if he was in the front, he'd be blocking everyone else out. Shaft right in front of Bedrock. And over here we have Die Hard with this fancy new, absolutely not Captain America shield. You can tell because it's silver instead of red, white, and blue with a star in the middle. So it's clearly a different shield, and Marvel can't sue over this. Creator, writer, penciler, Rob Liefeld. Inks, Danny K. Meeke. Color design and separations, Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. Lettering, Kurt Hathaway. Editor, Eric Stevenson. The story picks up as the rest of the Youngblood team races towards the aid of the away team, who they have lost contact with after the away team activated their distress beacon. And the rest of the team knows that for them to go radio silent with no communications to Washington means that something dire has happened and the away team is really in over their heads. At this point, Photon, along with Vogue and Bedrock and Shaft and Die Hard and Chapel are all racing towards their aid. The entire part of this portion of the comic, almost actually the majority of this comic, is being narrated by Die Hard, so we get a lot of his perspective throughout the story. As we see their jet racing in and the team prepares for a halo jump, Bedrock seems a little bit hesitant as he states, "Hey, we don't really have to jump. I mean, I have told you guys I'm afraid of heights, right?" As the team gets close to the drop point, Vogue asks if Stormwatch has been contacted, as this falls within their jurisdiction and they could provide useful help to Youngblood. However, Shaft states that there's no way that the US government would allow it to get out to anyone, even potential aid, that the Stormwatch away team is in trouble, as they don't want it to seem like they can't take care of their own, or that their superhero team could be in this kind of hot water. Now, Bedrock states, yeah, that doesn't matter. We don't need their help anyway. They're all a bunch of sissies. Now, what's funny is this is actually before Stormwatch has been published. So there is a little blurb down here that highlights to keep an eye out for Stormwatch in the near future. And if you'd like to know more about Stormwatch, feel free to check out my Stormwatch playlist. Also, Die Hard seems to be a little bit upset about the fact that Bedrock seems to be a little bit too chipper and jovial, and feels as though he should be taking things more seriously given the nature of the mission they're on. I do like that this is a big, cool 2-page splash image, but it does highlight a few things that need pointed out. Number one, what in the world type of crazy gun thing is Chapel holding here? This makes no sense, whatever this is supposed to be. Notice right here that Die Hard has nothing on his back. Now, I bring this up because that's going to be something that comes into play later in the issue. Also, I bring up this. Notice that Bedrock has 2 absolutely identical shoulder pads on this page, because that's something else that is going to be relevant very shortly. As they reach the drop zone, both Bedrock and Die Hard jump out of the jet with absolutely no parachutes. Again, Die Hard can fly, so it's not really that important to him. And Bedrock is apparently just so tough that he can land from this height and it won't hurt him in any way. Notice his shoulder pad has changed here, and for some reason it has a bunch of lines going across it, but it is still gold, not that different, but don't worry, it's going to change. And that Die Hard still has nothing on his back, because that's going to be changing shortly as well. As the duo continue to fall, Die Hard smashes through a window to gain entry to the building and is immediately greeted by 2 of the large android disciples who we met first in Youngblood number 2. He is not impressed by them at all, as he immediately jumps into action, smashing into the 2 of them and defeating them with a single blow. We then see Bedrock land safely behind him and state, "I don't see Sentinel or the others. What should we do?" And Die Hard simply says, "Well, we're just going to keep going deeper into the facility until we find him." And to this, Bedrock is like, "Well, wait a minute, what about Shaft and the others?" And at this point, Die Hard just states, "Listen, we're going to keep clearing a path until we find someone, and Shaft and the others are just going to have to catch up." And Bedrock seems totally okay with this. And at this point, Die Hard reminds himself that, for as hard as he was being on Bedrock and judging him in the way that he was handling himself, he does have to remember that Bedrock is in fact just a teenager who would otherwise be in high school, and that for someone as young as he actually is, he really does handle himself pretty well in battle, and he's someone that the rest of the team can always count on to have their backs. Now, in terms of these disciple androids, if you want to know the whole backstory about how they showed up and why, feel free to go back and watch my video on issue number 2 of Youngblood. You can find it in my Youngblood playlist. There was a lot going on in that issue. We got the disciples introduced, Darkthorn, John Prophet, the Berserkers. It was really way too much crammed into a single issue of a comic book. So it's something I can't really go into full explanation of when doing this video. Just go back and watch that one and then come back and finish watching this one. Also, as I stated before, we can see here that in 2 more pages, Bedrock's shoulder pad has changed again. Over here, we can see it's still gold, but now it seems to be covered in what would look like ammunition. And on this panel, now it's all like weird steel pill-shaped things with a gold band running down the middle. Again, it kind of looks like it's maybe supposed to be an ammo belt. For what? I don't know, because Bedrock doesn't carry any guns. And once again, we still don't see anything on Die Hard's back, but trust me, that's going to change very shortly. However, before they can get too far into the facility, they are greeted by none other than John Prophet as he tries to catch his breath after just defeating a wave of the disciples. They are confused by seeing him. Die Hard immediately asks who he is. Prophet explains himself, where he came from, sort of, why he's there, sort of, and states that he believes that Die Hard and Bedrock are allies of the people he was fighting alongside of. At this point, Die Hard's kind of confused and is like, wait a minute, who are you fighting? Who are these disciples? What's going on? However, before that question can be answered, a portal opens up to release more disciples into their location, and Prophet states that there's no time to explain, they have to fight with him or get out of his way. Die Hard decides to spring into action and aid Prophet in his quest to defeat the disciples, and takes up arms alongside of him as the disciples try to surround them. Die Hard asks if Prophet knows whether or not his friends are alive, and Prophet states he's not certain, that when the fighting started, they fought valiantly, but they were quickly overwhelmed as the numbers of the disciples were just too great, and now he's the only one still here as everyone else alongside him has fallen. At this point, he states to the disciples that he is the last part of the resistance, but Die Hard states no, he's got friends in us, as we see that the shield that we saw on the cover has now magically appeared on his back, because you can see in this panel above, it doesn't exist at all, and then suddenly it's there out of nowhere. So he decides to take the shield off of his back, which is a new experimental shield/weapon that was given to him by the boys in R&D back in Washington. We then see an advertisement for ETM, or Entertainment This Month, which was a mail-away service to have comic books sent directly to your home. I don't think this still exists. I haven't looked it up, but it may, though I do believe that in 2025 it would be somewhat inconsequential for something like this to exist. But hey, what do I know? We then get back into the story as we see that Die Hard is now holding the shield, and he also has whatever the heck this is supposed to be also on his back with no explanation, as he faces down a row of disciples, deciding that this new experimental toy, quote unquote, that he was given by the boys in Washington is untested, but now seems as good a time as ever to see if it really works out the way it's supposed to. And in this shot, I don't know how well it's showing up on camera. This other thing on his back kind of looks like some sort of weird pistol in a holster that's put in a position that would never make sense under any circumstances, but it's not going to matter because it's going to disappear eventually because, reasons. Die Hard then launches himself into battle, shield first, smashing into one of the disciple androids, and then begins pummeling another one, holding several others at bay with his shield, stating in his thought process that the shield is incredibly strong and durable as it's made out of the same alloys and composites as his synthetic body. And it also has another special ability as it can charge itself up with some sort of, ionization process that's not totally explained. And that when he throws it, because of course he throws it just like Captain America, it disperses all of that energy when it makes an impact, and then it has a computer guidance system inside of it that returns it immediately back to his hand. So while the rest of this disc is almost exclusively, ripping off Captain America's shield in the sense that, it's nigh indestructible, it's a circular disc, it can be thrown like a frisbee. It does have a few unique properties in the sense that it holds this whole energy blast that it can discharge upon impact, and it returns automatically because of computer programming, not just because the wielder of it is the best ultimate frisbee player ever to have lived. Bedrock also gets in on the action as he continues to help his friend by pummeling some of the other androids, and immediately as they're basically just wrapping things up with this group of disciples, we see that Chapel and Shaft join them as they finally caught up, and Chapel is still wielding his ridiculous gun that makes no sense, that now has 3 barrels instead of 4 because continuity, and he tells Prophet to freeze. However, Die Hard quickly informs him that Prophet is on their side. He then asks Shaft where the rest of the team is at, and Shaft explains that Photon and Vogue are trying to find other people throughout the facility that are on their side, hunting down the away team to see if they're okay. And he then asks what's going on and if this guy that's with them is friendly and has a name. Die Hard explains that his name is John Prophet and that he claims to have fought alongside of Sentinel and the rest of the away team. Shaft then is kind of starting to question a little bit of this as he states, disciples, prophet. Sounds like this is some kind of like biblical type of story that we're caught in the middle of. At this point, John Prophet goes into a little bit more detail as he explains that the disciples and he himself are products of a different time and that they're not supposed to be in this time or this place, that the disciples are from the future and that they're currently in their most basic of forms as they're being sent here through a device called crash tunnels, and that they're going to keep pouring through these tunnels until they've cleared a path for their leader. At this point, Shaft realizes that things are going to keep getting worse unless they finish or find a way to close off these crash tunnels. And he tells Prophet that they're more than willing to help him in any way that they can. At this point, Prophet states that the first priority has to be getting to the crash tunnels and closing them. And he states that when they find the crash tunnel, they'll be able to locate the rest of their allies. So Shaft decides to send Die Hard ahead, and Die Hard agrees with this move, stating that because of Project Born Again, he's absolutely expendable, as he can always be replaced. At this point, Shaft decides that he also needs to send Bedrock along with him, as despite Die Hard being as powerful as he is, he does need to have someone watching his back. He then tells the two of them and Prophet and Chapel that he and Chapel are going to stay behind and wait for Photon and Vogue to catch up until he's interrupted by a sight that catches him very much off guard. And the thing that he saw that caused him so much distress is the fact that Vogue has now arrived carrying a very battered and bruised and beaten Sentinel. Now, Sentinel, the consummate warrior, tries to put the situation at ease, stating, "I look worse than I actually feel." And Vogue says that she found him under a pile of rocks along with a lot of others. At this point, Shaft is confused, stating, "Who are these others?" And Sentinel fills him in on the Berserkers who came through one of the crash tunnels and tried to aid them in fighting the disciples. Shaft is still confused about what exactly is happening, and he asks, what are they after? And Sentinel explains that they are, in fact, after Prophet, and that Prophet is a very specially designed futuristic soldier whose sole purpose of existence is to defeat them, and that the only way they can be stopped at this point is if they can find a way to close the crash tunnel, which, of course, Prophet has already told them. Shaft decides that he needs to go along with this plan and tells Sentinel that he's already sent Die Hard and Bedrock to the crash tunnel to investigate and get started on figuring out a way to close it. We then teleport to none other than Bedrock and Die Hard as they're entering the crash tunnel, but Die Hard is concerned about the fact that there's no real resistance guarding it, and he believes that this could potentially be a trap that they're walking into. However, they dive headfirst into the crash tunnel and make their way to the other side, where they meet a new adversary. Also, we see here that Bedrock's shoulder pad has transformed back into just a bunch of gold bands, and that in this panel, he doesn't even have any shoulder pads nor a shirt, even though he has those shoulder pads and shirt in every other panel. Way to go, Rob. Way to stay on top of it. They, of course, have run into the leader of the disciples at this point, none other than Darkthorn himself. At this point, Bedrock and Die Hard are very aware of the fact that they are dealing with the head honcho of this opposing force, but they believe that they've got things under control and that the two of them combined should be able to handle this new foe. However, Darkthorn brings up a good point, stating, "If you couldn't handle my disciples, what on earth makes you think that you could handle their leader?" However, this is not a deterrent whatsoever for Die Hard, who simply states, "I'll take my chances," as he lunges into battle, only to be taken out with a single blow from Darkthorn as we see him knock back with blood spurting out of his face, which is odd because I'm pretty sure that Die Hard is supposed to be 100% synthetic, so it makes no sense that he would have blood coursing through his body in any way, shape, or form. And Bedrock realizes that things are going to get out of hand unless he steps in to save the day. However, Darkthorn uses this opportunity to show us all a new power that he has that we were all unaware of, which apparently is hypnosis, as his eyes begin to glow as he stares down Bedrock, and he tells Bedrock that there's no reason for him to fight and that he should in fact be joining Darkthorn to help him finish off his evil plans. Meanwhile, on the other side of the crash gate, we see that the rest of the Youngblood team has caught up and have now joined up with the Youngblood away team as well as the Berserkers as they try to figure out what to do about catching up with Die Hard and Bedrock and how they're going to close this gate. Also, once again, let's look at the fact that Bedrock's shoulder pad right here is now smooth and gold like it was at the beginning of the book, but by this panel is once again these weird metal pills with a gold band going down the middle of them. I don't understand why Rob was doing this. Like, there was no reason to try and change the look of any of Bedrock's shoulder pads at any point in this comic book, and he's done it multiple times where it just keeps bouncing from one thing to another, most likely because he wasn't drawing these pages in order, but because of that, he didn't keep track of what he was trying to do in his head, and now we just have this weird thing where Bedrock's shoulder pad is transforming throughout the entire book. Also, notice that Die Hard's shield has magically disappeared once again. We then get an advertisement for Youngblood Strike File with Jay Lee on pencils. Now, as of recording this video, I do not have any videos up of Youngblood Strike File, but stay tuned because they will be coming in the near future. Back to the story, we see that the away team, the main team, and the Berserkers are all about to enter the crash gate when suddenly they see a figure moving through it. As they brace themselves for what potentially could be a horrific battle, they see none other than Darkthorn coming through the crash gate without any of the disciples, but with a familiar silhouette right behind him that doesn't seem to be trying to do anything to stop him. We then find out that Bedrock is under the control of Darkthorn, and Darkthorn states that all of them will be as well unless they surrender John Prophet to him. This, of course, does not go over well with the Youngblood team, as Shaft simply says Bedrock no, and Chapel says say it ain't so, and we reach the end of this Youngblood story to find out that it's going to be concluded in Brigade number 4. Because of course it is. Why would you spend multiple issues building up to this one main climax of a story and not put it in another one of your titles to see the conclusion? Okay, I get it. You're trying to sell other books, but seriously, it doesn't make any sense to have built up to this story for so long. Well, 4 issues, that's not a huge amount of time, but it's in early Image time. That was probably, half a year at least, maybe more. And to suddenly throw that finish off into a different title altogether seems really weird and nonsensical, and I don't believe it probably went over well with fans. I'm only guessing. I don't know for sure if that's the case, but I feel like some feathers were probably ruffled by this. We then reach the Bloodlines letter section of the book, and I'm doing something that I've never done in a video before. I'm actually skipping 2 pages of the Bloodlines letter section because I'm not really going to go into any in-depth analysis of any of the letters that were submitted, because they're all basically just the same letter of people praising the Extreme Studios team for the work they've done on Youngblood and telling them how much they love the comic book. And it's basically just a bunch of ball washing, and that's all that you can really say about it. I mean, there are people who ask a bunch of questions, but none of them really get straight answers out of Rob Liefeld or whoever might be answering their letters at this point in the game. And so it doesn't seem worth it to try and get too deep into any of it. We then get a 2-page advertisement for the Extreme Studios 1993 tour and a list of cities that it's going to be going to, and you can even meet Chapel in person, or at least the guy that they painted the face of and dressed in tactical gear to play Chapel. This was something that Extreme Studios did for some reason, where they would hire actors to come in and play the role of one of their characters when they were making public appearances. They did the same thing with Evangeline as well. I never really understood it. I don't know if this was like a common practice throughout the 90s, where different comic book companies would hire actors to play their characters during tours or meet and greets or conventions, but Extreme Studios sure did seem to enjoy doing this kind of thing. And looking back, it seems really kind of silly, like, especially given the nature of what these books were, and especially a character like Chapel. Like, I get he's one of the more popular characters in Youngblood at this time, but it still seems odd. Like, he's not portrayed as this friendly dude that would want to just meet a bunch of people throughout the story. So my guess it's just because he's probably the easiest one to make a costume, quote unquote, for, because you're literally just buying black tactical gear, putting it on like the most muscular, jacked black dude you can find, and then painting a skull on his face. So maybe that had something to do with it. We then get our introduction to the brand new character from Dale Keown known as Pitt. Now, if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you may know that I've already been making videos about the ongoing Pitt series since the start of the channel. Like, I think my second video was on Pitt number 1. So if you want to know more about what goes on after this little intro to Pitt, feel free to check out those videos in my Pitt playlist. However, it all started off right here in the back pages of Youngblood number 4, where we see a Creed space vessel approaching a space station that seems to be some sort of like ship that also acts as like a mini terraforming vessel that is attached to an asteroid. And this space station is doubling as a prison for none other than Pitt. As the Creed exit their craft, they immediately want to know where Pitt is, and the warden states that he'll take them to the cell where they're holding Pitt, and that they should probably do their interrogation here, as they can use all of the persuasive methods that the prison has at their disposal. However, the commanding officer of this force, who is a member of the Creed, instantly yells at the warden, stating, "You're completely underestimating Pitt, and that's going to be your undoing." The warden states, however, though, that he wasn't underestimating Pitt at all, and he has 12 men that Pitt has ripped to shreds to prove it. As they make their way towards Pitt's cell, the warden explains that the entirety of Pitt's cell is made up of reinforced titanium, and there's absolutely no way he could ever escape. However, the warden simply tells him that he needs to shut up and open the door so they can get down to business, which he immediately does. And as the door opens, we see the warden is rather distraught and disturbed by what he sees, which is an empty cell, and he knows that things are about to hit the fan for him. The warden then shouts out "Gone?" as he's shocked to see the broken shackles that once held Pitt, as he states this is impossible. As the commanding officer of the Creed force watches him, he then screams "impossible," but then he looks up at the Creed commander, who is standing silently above him, and he knows that failure is intolerable, as he slowly pulls his pistol out of its holster and points it at his own head and pulls the trigger. We then are teleported to a subway, presumably in New York City, I'm guessing, where we see Timmy and his grandfather riding the subway, having just watched a Penguins game, and Timmy was also given an autographed Mario Lemieux hockey stick, which he's super excited about, and his grandfather states, it's not every day someone turns 8 years old, so it's really cool to be able to do this for you, and I'm hoping that you've had a terrific birthday. Timmy states that this is the best birthday ever. However, they're interrupted when a group of tough-looking thugs carrying weapons enter the car they're on and start accosting a young woman who is riding on the train. They immediately start calling her skank and all sorts of other things, making lewd comments to her, grabbing her and pushing her up against the side of the train. The lead thug even shows her a knife up in front of her face. At this point, Timmy's grandfather has had enough, as he instantly stands up and states, "Hey, you let her go." However, before that can go anywhere, the rest of the thugs immediately jump him and start beating him with their clubs and punching him with their fists. And Timmy is very enraged by this, as he jumps up immediately and says, "Hey, quit it." And then runs up and literally cracks the hockey stick in half on the back of one of the thugs' heads. Never mind the fact that there's literally no way an 8-year-old child is strong enough to be able to break a hockey stick in half over the head of an adult man. The lead thug then grabs Timmy and slams him up against the wall, as he tells the kid, "Hey, you screwed up big," and then tells the rest of his buddies to grab the wallet of the old man, when suddenly a strange green glowing light appears on the other side of the train, and everyone stops as they're confused by what they're looking at. We then see that none other than Pitt himself suddenly appears and lands in the middle of the train car like the Terminator from the future. He wastes no time in getting up, immediately growing the length of his claws as he prepares for battle. And the thugs are shocked by what they're seeing, stating, "What is that?" And some other guy states, "Some bare-ass naked freak, that's what he is." One guy is really stunned and trying to figure out how he appeared out of nowhere, and another guy states, "Hey, he looks pretty tough," which of course he does. He's a 12-foot muscle monster with 6-inch claws. And the leader states, "I don't care how tough he looks, we can take him," which makes no sense at all that he would come to this conclusion, but okay. The gang then instantly leaps into action, all bum-rushing Pitt, except for one who has enough sense to realize how stupid of an idea that is. And they all begin to try and fight him when the lights suddenly go out, and then they come back on, and we see that Pitt, of course, is absolutely murdering all of them, just destroying them one by one, smashing them against the walls of the train, knocking them off their feet, breaking their bones, grabbing them by their shirts and smashing their heads together on the roof of the train car. holding the two of them up, one of them screaming as he states he thinks his skull is cracked. Pitt then lets them go as one thug escapes off the train as it stops. Pitt then picks up the broken hockey stick, hands it back to Timmy, tells him not to be afraid, and that he is a good fighter. He then jumps through the roof of the train car, escaping before the police get there, and then Grandpa wakes up to look around and is shocked by what he sees, and Timmy just states, "That seems like a natural hat trick if you ask me." Now, why is it that we've now seen this where this group of thugs see Pitt appear out of nowhere, and instead of being even remotely afraid of this gigantic alien monster guy with 6-inch claws, they just immediately decide to jump him and try to hurt him or kill him or whatever, which, why? Why would you think that's the natural conclusion? The same thing happened in Pitt number 1 with the biker gang, but at least they had guns. These guys are just carrying knives and pipes and bats. Like, what is it? What is it with every group of dudes that Pitt encounters? They just automatically are like, hey, look at that giant monster guy. We should go try and fight him with our bare hands. That'd be a great idea. We then see Pitt break to the surface and start climbing his way up the sheer side of a skyscraper, using his claws to just punch grip holes into the concrete, reaching the top of the skyscraper, stating that Earth has a different atmospheric condition that he's used to and he's going to need time to adjust, and that he's going to have a hard time fitting in as he doesn't look like the inhabitants of this planet, and that there seems to be a lot of hostile people here, and he hates it already as we reach the end of this Pitt mini-story. Now, we notice also that in this first iteration, Pitt still has like a Caucasian flesh tone look to him. This is, I guess, before Dale decided to just make him have gray skin, as that became kind of the norm for all of the Creed. But in this early rendition of Pitt, he looked like a normal-ish colored type of alien or person, I guess, even though he's from another planet. But for whatever reason, Dale decided to change this in the final version that he went to print with for the ongoing series. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for Bloodstrike number 1. If you'd like to know more about that comic, you can check out my video on Bloodstrike number 1. And that was Youngblood number 4. Overall, the story wasn't too bad. It was definitely more coherent than what we saw in issue number 2, which began this story arc with John Prophet, because it wasn't trying to introduce so many new characters and just throwing so much information that had no explanation behind it all in our face at one time. It was definitely a more linear type of story that was easier to follow. But again, there's so many weird continuity errors in the artwork, and also the idea that you were going to then finish off this story arc in issue number 4 of Brigade makes no sense. I mean, I get you're trying to get people interested in Brigade, but again, like, this has been an ongoing story arc that people have been invested in for months now, and you're like, oh, by the way, buy this other book that maybe you don't have any issues of to figure out what happens with the Youngblood team. That just seems kind of like a scummy move. Also, we get the introduction of Pitt in this issue, and it's fine. It's a very adequate way to try and introduce Pitt into the Image universe, and it does go seamlessly into the beginning of Pitt number 1 from this story. We do see a few things that kind of don't make sense, like the idea of Pitt's skin changing to a different color by the time we get to Pitt number 1. And also that whole thing with like every group of like ne'er-do-wells who see Pitt are not even slightly intimidated by this gigantic monster creature and immediately just want to attack him with no provocation whatsoever. And again, the whole idea that an 8-year-old child is going to be able to swing a hockey stick hard enough to literally break it in half across the back of someone's head is laughable. No 8-year-old child is that strong. But then again, these are all just my opinions. You may disagree with many of them. You may think that it's okay that this story arc from Youngblood is concluded in Brigade number 4, that there's nothing wrong with the Pitt story, that everything makes sense, that maybe there is an 8-year-old child out there who's somehow strong enough to do what we saw Timmy do. And if that's the case, it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. and thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.